Alright, EA Ermor turned 55. We finished research in Alteration 6, moving on to Alteration 7, which we've discussed. Therados gets a claim. This looks like an underwater throne, so not too relevant to us, but maybe indicating that things are going better for them underwater. We bring in some Bind Ogres, doing our spying, of course. Our mind hunts are successful, at least the first one, and our second one also successful. These are against barbarian chieftains who at best have average magic resistance, but yeah, definitely on the easy side of things. Still, it is a promising sign, and hopefully those are the only chiefs there, so our lone commander will be able to take that province for us. We also search for some astral sites, don't find any as happens. And then we catch a lot of battles, most of which are against the independents, which is kind of interesting, although this is perhaps the most interesting battle of the turn. Kind of our first inkling as to, we've been wondering where Agartha's forces were. Hadn't really seen a whole lot, and here we have Russ attacking Agartha. It's just against some province defense, not very good province defense. But this is at least some of what Russ is using. We've of course seen some of their bear groups and some of their sacreds before, but I think this might be one of the first thugs of theirs that we've seen. This is some really heavy kit. So like, this is a 10 gem item, this is a 10 gem item, this is a 10 gem item. So full kit, some of which a little on the more expensive side. That said, this is a hero with heroic quickness, which is one of the better heroic traits. So yeah, this is going to be a pretty scary thug to deal with. Although 24 hit points may be a bit on the low side. That said, with the bless, being enlarged, normally I know some people say trying to thug out Russ's commanders, not necessarily the best idea. But I don't think that guy's going to have any trouble with that province defense. I mean, he does not. Let's see, Niflheim declares a prophet, and then this, I believe, is our army taking out those barbarians. Yeah, so we sent a ton of stuff. We're not actually wasting any gems, I don't think, other than the gems that we used to forge this jar. So, that is the advantage of those items. Is that once you spend the gems, you don't spend any more, although it takes him, he chooses not even to use it. So he felt that, we brought enough stuff and it wasn't going to be worth actually spending a gem because the AI can't really differentiate between the temporary gems and real gems. So if gem usage doesn't get triggered, it won't use the temporary gems either. But regardless, it works out for us. We only lose 2 Ostati. That's fine. And then we catch Vanheim, also clearing out some independents. I believe this is a Van Jarl. Yeah, it's just up against some villains. Villains are pretty awful. So I think this Van Jarl is going to do just fine. We'll check the kit. Also a bit on the expensive side, although not full kit. But yeah, with all that, I think it's going to be pretty easy for this guy. That said, it is a little difficult for Vanheim to get a hold of nature gems and water gems. So Vanheim has managed to break into some paths, or at least do some trading in order to be able to afford some of that gear. And then this is Agartha moving into this formerly TNN province that they said TNN had agreed to give them, and requested that we allow them to take it, which we just said, well, we'll race you for it, and they beat us to it. But yeah, we're planning on attacking Agartha shortly anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. Although this is looking a little on the scary side. It's kind of interesting. Okay, these guys must be on fire and keep distance. Thought maybe they'd been given a couple fire commands and then set to retreat. But yeah, the mage probably with Soul Vortex here will be able to handle the situation. Yeah, he has enough hit points, but 20 protection, definitely not enough to keep you completely safe against the barbarians, and a few of them have wrapped and have managed to reach the Olms, who are pretty squishy. Yeah, so do lose some Olms here, but otherwise this works out for Agartha pretty effectively, though I'm sure they're sad. Let's see, yeah, losing 5 Olms, that's not ideal. Yeah, they're pretty expensive. Actually, they're even more expensive than I realized. So that's, maybe not the best result. But still, they did manage to take out 50 barbarians, maybe not on the cheap, but without using too many units or too many commanders, and that is always nice. So they have assumedly other units doing other things. Then we have Saramatia trying to unlock their capital from a pretty nasty attack. There's quite a few Demon Knights, and Demon Knights are pretty scary. Speaking of using assets, they have brought out a ton of mages, these Revenants here, which it looks like they've summoned, quite a few of, and it's looking like more or less just Skelly spam with the addition of Howl. So just going for all the chaff against some pretty nasty elites. So, these Inaris will fall asleep here. They're also summoning some ancestors who, if they manage to deal any damage, should stun these knights here. Just wanted to double check. Yes, these ancestral spirits do paralyzing damage. They don't really do any damage otherwise, but the demon knights do also have good protection, but they have decent defense, and the undead don't have great attack skills, so when they paralyze the knights, that will help. This is starting to look a little dangerous because the Inaris are mostly asleep, but when they do wake up, they do generate a ton of skeletons. So we'll see. And with Hal, Hal is really actually, a couple of them almost broke through there. Hal is helping out a lot here, I think, to keep them busy while the Inaris take their nap before they make more skeletons. The Inaris, I think, always are just Death 2. Yeah, they're all Death 2, and there's no communion here, and so it kind of demonstrates Death 2s can generate a lot of skeletons, but once they fall asleep, the rate of production really slows down. So eventually, they are able to cut their way through the Demon Knights, but Long Dead aren't great, and I don't think Demon Knights have much in the way of encumbrance. Yeah, so that's one of the main advantages of Skelly Spam is, most human units or most living units will tire out fighting them, and then their skills will get, much worse. The Demon Knights will eventually tire out, I think. Actually, no, yeah, they're still doing pretty well in terms of fatigue, so, their skills aren't really going to go down here. They can fight these skeletons, it seems like, more or less forever. And so, yeah, Skelly Spam maybe not such a great answer. On the other hand, it's much better to lose all these skeletons rather than actual units. It does look like this is going to work out for Sarmatia eventually. So they do have to use a boatload of mages, but they don't take any losses, and unlocking their capital is pretty important, and Demon Knights are pretty scary, as demonstrated by their kill counts. But yeah, that works out, a nice use of Skelly Spam. And then we have a battle here. I think this is our commander. Yeah, who's trying to scare away the barbarians. And this almost works out, except somehow there's a crippled barbarian. I guess, he must have been crippled fighting our minimal amount of province defense. And as a result, our commander retreats off before he can get off the field. So we actually technically lose that battle. There's just one crippled barbarian remaining. So we'll have to send the commander in again next turn. That's unfortunate. But, overall, the mind hunting more or less worked out. Probably should have scripted some more holds or, maybe just even an attack. Losing a commander is fine. We didn't know that all the commanders were dead from the mind hunts, so, wanted to try to hold on to the commander if we could. But as a result, we did not take that province. And then, we have some of our raiders going up against villains in a cave, which is nice. And they're shooting our Equite because there is some danger, right? We have a squishy commander. Actually, no, we have a mounted commander here as well, who actually is a little on the squishy side. But between the two different commanders, pretty unlikely that this group is going to have its leadership sniped. And our Equite are going to do just fine. Even though they don't see super well in the dark, the villains don't either. So that works out for us. Yeah, no losses. We like to see that, although villain's not the greatest challenge. And then there's an assault, I think. Niflheim's the attacker. This is Oceania's capital. Yeah, and this is an important battle, absolutely. And for Niflheim, we have a long line of sea trolls here. Don't love the long line formation in assaults, but, it should work out. Niflheim hasn't brought all that many units to this fight, which is probably a good thing in terms of, not clogging up the gap too much. Sea trolls, of course, also being very useful in underwater fights since they, breathe underwater naturally. Also some undead, the large giant types, which are better, but still long dead is not great. But they've also got some ether warriors here who are pretty good as far as troops go, although they do suffer a bit from getting rusty equipment, although I don't think the moon blades will rust. And then they've got a sea king here who's been kitted out mostly to just open the gate. Also a few water gems. They just generate the water gems. Probably going to be summoning some water elementals. A Scrotty who's been boosted in blood and nature with quite a few nature gems as well as some water gems. So it'll be interesting to see what he does with those. A giantess who has been set up probably for Skelly Spam, I would guess, as well as a Nifl Jarl, although it's looking like he's more in caster mode, been boosted in water and has a ton of water gems. So probably mostly water elementals and other chaff, coming from these guys. Not too much in the way of super combatants. On Oceania's side, we've got mostly mages, really. Some summoned like ghost chaff, or actually, dispossessed spirit chaff, like some random animal, underwater animal chaff, which, I don't think is going to be great, although these sea serpents do at least have fear, as well as a ton of hit points. I'm definitely like less familiar with underwater summons, so those guys seem somewhat fearsome, although their attack density is pretty abysmal. And then quite a few sirens, who looks like they're all water too, and have been given quite a few water gems, so, going to be a lot of water elementals. That's no surprise considering this is underwater. They also have one of the underwater pans, who has not been given any gems, interestingly, and is maybe set up kind of as a counter thug. I'm not really sure on that one. But it looks like no nature gems have really been handed out. Mostly, some earth boots here to boost this guy up, so a little bit of earth casting, probably your normal Strength of Giants, Legions of Steel kind of stuff. And then, let's take a look. Hard to say. There's a lot of water gems on Oceania's side, but I would say that Niflheim's troops are probably a bit better. Okay, so the Skrati actually going with Foul Vapors, which is kind of interesting because a lot of underwater stuff has poison resistance, although it looks like the Sirens definitely do not. So if Oceania doesn't have a counter setup to this, that's going to be pretty catastrophic for their Mage Corps. This battle probably is going to take a second, as a lot of Oceania's stuff isn't going to kill super quickly, and sea trolls do regenerate a lot, so it can take a while to kill them, although I have seen a couple of them die already. A little bit of banishment being thrown out to take out the undead. There's some of those water elementals. So it looks like mostly water elementals coming out from Niflheim's side. Not really any water elementals coming out. Oh no, there's at least one water elemental from Oceania's side, but fewer than I would have thought. Okay, it looks like at least some of those water gems were used to cast Water Ward, which I actually had to look up. So that's +5 defense on a pretty big AoE. And that's definitely a nice buff, but I don't know. I think maybe we would have preferred more water elementals. Certainly I don't think these sea serpents are going to benefit too much from that. Well, they actually have better, let's see. There you go, Water Shield +5. But still, better base defense than I might have expected. Maybe the Krakens also have. Okay, these guys actually have like decent defense skills. So maybe a little better than I thought, and sea trolls do kind of have garbage attack skill. Even the ones that have equipment, in theory are like the soldiers. Their overall attack is just 7, so they're gonna struggle to hit these monsters. So it's a more effective strategy than I was expecting. A little bit of body ethereal though coming out. I guess the ether warriors are already ethereal, so they're able to just go through the walls. And they don't get hung up in the gap. But overall, this seems to be going pretty well for Oceania. Although again, they are on the clock here because their casters are taking a good amount of poison damage, and if this goes on long enough, everybody will die. Well, at least the majority of Oceania's casters. And then Niflheim has also put up Friendly Currents, which looks like it helps with their speed, as well as a bit of a bonus, kind of like relief, helps out with their fatigue. Although Oceania here doesn't really, they're summoning a little bit of chaff, but there's not a ton of chaff to cut through. And then of course Oceania does have a few of their sacreds here, and they definitely are going to like that bonus to defense, because they already have pretty good defense. So even though there's not that many of them, they've been able to hang out for quite a long time, because there isn't really a ton here other than the Sea King and the Ether Warriors, who look like they're dead now. That really can hit them in combat. Like the Long Dead similarly are going to really struggle. So this is looking decently good for Oceania, other than the fact that they're losing a lot of their mages to Foul Vapors. So they might hold this, but I'm not sure if they'd be able to hold a second attack, because they're going to have a lot fewer casters. Also, that Sea King has gotten through and is dealing a lot of damage. So the Sea King is looking like he might come away with it. This is looking like Niflheim, armies of Oceania are routed. It looks like Niflheim comes away, and the Sea King actually coming in pretty clutch. The fact that he was able to get body ethereal on him being pretty important. But considering how much was left in Oceania, which is like not all that much, I would say that either this war or possibly some of their wars against other underwater opponents haven't gone very well. And so while Niflheim does take some losses, a lot of which don't matter too much, like the trolls, that's okay. The Ether Warriors, that does suck to lose. One of the Crystal Sorceresses, not ideal, but for these losses, to take a capital, especially an underwater capital, definitely worth it. And this is really bad news for us, because while it did look like the war wasn't going so well for Oceania on the land, I was expecting them to be able to hold out underwater more or less indefinitely, or at least for quite a long time. But yeah, like I said, I'm guessing that they were weakened in another war, and Niflheim was able to take advantage of that, or Niflheim has just been doing excellent work underwater, because normally land nations really struggle underwater. So yeah, very impressive that Niflheim is able to take an underwater capital. And then yeah, speaking of Oceania and their land presence, we saw this force, fight a battle last turn, but it's mostly just mages. Yeah, the eagles go in immediately. So they do at least have body ethereal on them, but, and the eagles only have mundane weapons, but there's just too many eagles, and, there's nothing to protect the casters, really. Though one of them is managing to hold out. Yeah, I don't know why this siren in particular they're struggling with. She's probably just getting some lucky rolls. So yeah, that does work out for Niflheim, and Oceania loses their last land presence, at least that we know about. And it's looking like Niflheim is going to be loose here pretty soon, which is, at least, we're closing down the TNN war, but we were hoping to at least take out Agartha before, we had to worry about Niflheim again. So we'll have to try to keep an eye on where they go next. Then we have an unexpected event. We find some troll dung, which means that we're probably going to find some trolls in this province soon, which means we're probably going to lose that province soon. So we'll have to deal with that when that happens. The stars are right for alterations, which we are not really planning on taking advantage of. We also lose a scout to Xibalba. I'm guessing this is probably, a blood hunting operation. So we bumped into one of their blood hunting operations. It does indicate that Xibalba is doing a good amount of blood hunting, which is not that surprising, but still is useful to note. And, if we fight them in the short term, which hopefully not, but if we do, then we know that this is one of the places that we can try to disrupt their blood hunting operations. Then we have a little bit of patrolling to control unrest in TNN, and I will catch you guys after the jump. Alright, this is the situation and what we're doing about it. Sadly, we're not doing all that much this turn. So we're actually sending this army home, and then we're just doing a little bit of patrolling here, and we're just hanging out and researching in this location. So I went ahead and skipped ahead because I definitely don't remember exactly when our war against Agartha starts, and it looks like it's going to be launched on turn 59. So we didn't even send the ending of the non-aggression pact this turn. I think, we probably did it through Discord. So it'll end on turn 56, and then we'll start fighting on turn 59. There's really no reason, with the benefit of hindsight, not to launch this as quickly as possible. So I definitely should have moved a little bit faster. I had to search a little bit. I forgot why I had taken so long, and I believe the reason is we are in the quest for infinite skeletons. We are early age Ermor after all, so we're bringing up some vine ogres, and we are summoning some vine ogres here. And sadly, we're not summoning any Vine Ogres down here, but Vine Ogres we can use as a Soul Vortex battery. So we'll use their hit points to get fatigue back from our Death Mages who can cast Soul Vortex. So we'll just set them to Bodyguard, and that will allow us to generate a lot more skeletons, because our skeleton production in the war against TNN was okay, but not great. So while I do support infinite skeleton generation, I think that's an important milestone to hit for really any nation if you can pull it off, but particularly for early age Ermor, because death magic is one of our benefits, one of our advantages. Delaying the war a turn, not really worth it, especially since now we know, Russ has moved in and is definitely attacking Agartha, and it looks like Agartha just has these two forts. It's not impossible that they have a fort, here, I guess, but it would be kind of an odd position for a fort. It's kind of hard to get out of this province, so it seems likely that they don't have another fort. And Russ is looking pretty dangerous, both, from their bless that we've seen, and also from the fact that, now that we've scouted their lands a little bit more, they're actually a 4-capital nation, right? So they have Helheim, they have Satis somewhere in here. Yeah, here's Satis. And then over here on their border with Femoria, they also have Hinnom, and then of course they have their own capital down here, very close to us. So, probably won't take them all that long to overwhelm Agartha, considering how weak we left them. And, it's entirely, if Russ replaces Agartha, we really do need this territory regardless of who owns it. It's going to be a lot easier to take it from Agartha than it is going to be to take it from Russ. That said, we have been fighting for quite a long time nonstop, so, it's easy to look back on this and say that, hey, I should have moved faster. I'm sure at the time I figured, 1 or 2 turns to kind of reorganize and get the next phases of our plans for our army in order wouldn't be the end of the world. And it still may not be. We only see ratings so far, and, we're not aware of where Agartha's Pretender is. Obviously, we struggled quite a bit against Agartha's Pretender. I think Russ will struggle a little less since they have easier access to thugs than we do, and it's also later in the game. But Agartha might be able to hold Russ off with that for some time, and we still don't really know where their main army is, so possibly Agartha still has some forces left that can turn Russ around. In terms of recruitment, we don't have too much going on, just recruiting more legionary infantry. This is probably, speaking of hindsight, probably a few too many. Let's see, we're up to like 36. I suppose like 40 is a nice round number. But we also have, a ton of legionary infantry here with this group, and we'll probably ultimately end up combining this stuff. So that's going to be way too much infantry, but we are also recruiting Equite. You really can't have too many Equite, I would say. They really are pretty excellent, even though they do fall off a bit later in the game. They are not cheap to maintain, and we are recruiting some of our priests, both for healing purposes, because we're planning on doing some mind hunting, and these priests have the healer trait, so if things go wrong with our mind hunters, these priests can heal them up. Then they can also, provide bless support for any Equite groups that, break off from our Holy Threes with our main armies. That more or less covers it in terms of what we're up to, and covers the majority of our scouting. We can see that, Vanheim has cracked this fortification here, so it looks like this Ulmish war is possibly winding down. We do know that Ulm had a pretty substantial army here in their capital, so they may choose to try to contest this, but also, there's probably like a stack of Vanheers here, and Ulm may feel that it would be better to, just face those Vanheers inside their own capital. And then speaking of Vanheim, they do look pretty narrow here, so, that while they were looking like pretty big in terms of extending all the way out over in this direction, they're not actually very wide, right? So, Calum actually juts into them quite a bit, and they're only one province, broad here. Therados actually managed to nab at least some of the coastline. So Vanheim is maybe not quite as powerful as we'd thought, is kind of like more long and stringy, and, may actually be a decent target. We know that Abyssia is definitely interested in attacking them. And, again, we're not against that, but we really have to solve this situation first. Hopefully that war will go relatively quickly, and then, we can jump in and help against Vanheim, but probably for like the next, 10 turns, we're going to be tied up. And then, of course, Niflheim, always curious about, what they're up to. We do see a group of trolls here, not really sure why they're on our border. The non-aggression pact is still in place, so unless they're planning on breaking it, maybe they're getting some notifications about trolls or barbarians that are planning to attack them there, and they just happen to have some trolls available and have moved them into position. Also of note, for those of you who are paid a little more attention, probably already aware of this, but Niflheim did not actually win this battle, so the replay bug rears its head again, and hopefully, I think it's turn 63 roughly. These are actually going to switch over to live recordings for the most part. So, we have a little bit less than 10 turns where we're probably going to see a few more replay bugs, and then hopefully that'll drop off. But still, like, Niflheim got pretty close, so there wasn't, a whole lot left. Although, of note, there was a Demi-Lich here that I just missed. They're so tiny, it's easy to miss them. And it had pretty high pathing, but no gems really, and it was what was responsible for the skeletons and undead on Oceania's side. But then it's just switched into like kind of terror and panic spam. It also has some nature. And I don't think it was especially relevant, although possibly in the version of the battle that we did not see, some of that panic did cause like the Sea King to rout, potentially explains, how Niflheim could have been defeated. So, even though Niflheim did lose here, the majority of the mages for Oceania were lost to foul vapors, the same way that we saw in the replay that we watched. And in case it wasn't already evident, spoiler, this does not work out for Oceania long term. So I don't remember exactly, when the capital actually falls. Maybe a couple turns yet, but this is not going to go well for them. But they are at least holding out for now, and yeah, I think that more or less covers turn 55. All right, EA Ermor, turn 56. We finished research and alteration, level 7, moving on to enchantment 8. So we've switched over. Alteration 7 does provide us with Fog Warriors, which we can kind of cast, as well as Mass Protection. So definitely a useful level to hit. I think enchantment 8, we're looking at those elemental resistances, particularly cold resistance, could become very important for us, as we don't even have that on the Bless. So in a lot of ways, we really don't have a great defense against Niflheim yet, and enchantment 8 will help a good amount with that. We also try some arcane probing, and we miss twice, as happens. We catch another battle between Russ and Agartha, again with Russ attacking, so this is not looking great. This is also kind of on our side of the river, if you will. This is pretty close. In fact, I believe this is that province that TNN had agreed to give Agartha. So like this, yeah, in fact, this is the guy that we saw take it. And in fact, this may have even been a magic phase attack, because I believe, yeah, this guy has enough air to be doing Cloud Trapeze, and is a different thug than what we saw before, also with pretty heavy kitting, a little cheaper, right? This is the only 10 gem item, but still a full kit, and, you know, very scary. And yeah, I'm not really sure who will win this. Depending on the research level that Agartha has, Petrify is an option that's open to them, or of course Skelly Spam. But yeah, this guy's gonna be pretty dangerous. You know, he's got the Fire Shield, he's got the Blood Vengeance, he can also hit really hard. Yeah, this guy is gonna regenerate based off of the Soul Vortex, and looks like he also has Fear. No, actually, nobody on Agartha's side has Fear. It looks like, you know, just an Umbral managed to get through a couple of times and, you know, hit Russ's commander, and he just failed a morale check and routed off. So it does look like he's going to be able to escape. Agartha is not exactly known for their speed. So that works out for Agartha, and, you know, maybe even better if this fellow, if he was Cloud Trapezing in, he may not have a retreat route, so that would be really nice if he was killed in the retreat. We do manage to find a magic site just through some manual site searching in Desert of Bones, which does allow for recruitment of an independent mage, but don't think we're really going to bother. We definitely don't want to fort this province. You know, it's kind of a useless wasteland. And if I'm recalling, the main benefit of this mage, I don't know about the main benefit, but probably the most exciting benefit is it provides access to Wailing Winds because of the Air Death Crosspath, but we already have that nationally, so it's kind of less of an important find for us, although I do think it's at least 1 gem, maybe 2 gems, so we definitely appreciate that. And then it looks like Ulm is actually going to ride out and fight Vanheim, so I was thinking, you know, possibly they might want to hide inside their fort, but no, it looks like they have brought, I don't know about everything, probably everything though. There are a ton of mages in here. Early age Ulm's mages are not known for their great power, but they have been handed, looks like about an Earth gem apiece here for the most part, and, you know, some of the Earth 2s probably just going to be doing Strength of Giants, Legions of Steel, probably some Earth Elementals coming out, or maybe some baby Earth Elementals. But yeah, not a ton of gems have been handed out, although the Pretender is out, who has definitely seen his share of fighting, a ton of afflictions stacked up, also old age and cursed, so, you know, has been through the wars, but has some air gems and some astral pearls. And then, you know, a lot of Ulmish troops along with some skeletons, some terracotta warriors. So, you know, a good amount of stuff, and they're up against the non-stealthy stuff that we'd seen from Vanheim before, but also quite a few Vanheers. And of course, Vanheer's extremely dangerous. Also, quite a few Vanherses in here, although it doesn't really look like any gems have been distributed. Yeah, at least a few of them have been lightly kitted out as thugs, but for the most part, unkitted, and it doesn't really look... Yeah, here's another thug, but I don't actually see any Vanadrats that might be putting up a storm. So looks like these Vanherses might not get up to too much. Also just some regular elven troops in the back. Looks like maybe to catch flyers and a nature mage, although no nature gems. So yeah, it looks like this is just mostly, you know, a sacred and or thug army against, you know, regular troops, along with a ton of mages here. Although relatively low-level mages, so we have some swarms coming out, quite a few swarms. It looks like Ulm was also able to get Mass Protection off. That's an Alteration 7 spell, so it looks like Early Age Ulm also has hit Alteration 7. Some full-sized Fire Elementals coming out, so it looks like I was wrong about those being lesser Fire Elementals. And of course, the Pretender, Ulm's Pretender is the one who puts up a Storm, so that's kind of interesting. Usually it's Vanheim who's the one that's putting up Storm. And then Howl also coming from Early Age Ulm. It looks like Early Age Ulm also able to get some Marble Warriors out, so a lot more buffs. Wow, is that Fog Warriors coming out? Yeah, so Ulm has managed to cast Fog Warriors, which is not trivial for them to cast, and Vanheim not really been casting a ton of army-wide buffs. Actually, I stand corrected. They have managed to cast Mass Protection, and that is pretty important, but no Fog Warriors on their side. So while Vanheim's troops are definitely much better, I don't know about much better, much better. Early Age Ulm's troops are good, but when you compare them to Vanheir's, there's not a lot that are better than Vanheir's, at least in melee. So you have better troops on Vanheim's side, but more buffs and more spell support from Early Age Ulm. Although that's mostly in the form of army-wide buffs, but the fire elementals will be relevant, especially because Mass Protection has reduced the fire resistance that's on the Bless for Vanheim, although they still have 5 fire resistance left, and combined with the 20 protection, those fire elementals are going to be a lot less dangerous than they normally would be, and we can see that, these Vanheirs, while they are getting some kills, they are dying. I do think, they do have magic weapons, so that's going to help them cut through the Fog Warriors, but still, they are badly outnumbered, and it looks like at least some of the squads have probably been set to attack rear from Early Age Ulm, and, not really sure, we haven't seen a whole lot, or at least I haven't seen a whole lot from the thugs, from Vanheim's side, so they didn't really seem to do too much. We'll have to double check the battle report, but this is looking like it's going to work out for Early Age Ulm, which is certainly not the way I was expecting this war to be going, or it doesn't look like it's the way that the war has been going. I believe at this point there had been a sub for Early Age Ulm, and the sub player is pretty good, and this is our host actually that's playing as Vanheim, and it just speaks to their quality as a host that they went out of their way to actually find a good sub for a player that they're fighting against, although in this case it kind of works against them, and that looks like a pretty massive loss for Vanheim. So on Ulm's side they lose 40 Axe Warriors. It's not irrelevant, but Axe Warriors are not that expensive, standard, so they can replace those pretty quickly. They don't lose any mages. They do spend a good number of gems, but what they get for that gem expenditure is pretty good. 56 Vanheirs is pretty important. That's one of the main strengths of Vanheim. Not the only strength, but certainly one of the major strengths. And since these guys can only be recruited out of the capital, it's going to take a while to replace those losses. They're also not very fast, although Vanheim's capital is actually not that far from Ulm, so at least from, moving them there, it won't take too long. But replacing them will be somewhat difficult. Also, losing 10 Vanheirses, that is kind of rough. They're not super expensive, but they're not cheap either, and that's quite a few fort turns to be losing, and we can see they don't really get up to too much in the way of kills. Like, you compare that to the Vanheirs, they only slightly outperform 11 Jade Maidens, and there's 10 Vanheirses. So Army Thugs, really difficult to build in my opinion. I do think they have value, but it's very easy to throw a lot of mages into that role and not really get much benefit out of them. Vanheirses, I think, are a bit difficult to use in battle. They really kind of do need that storm, so they can summon storm power and at least cast lightning bolt, which still isn't going to net you a ton of kills per mage. But this is a pretty big upset here and could unbalance things. Ulm is pretty close to TNN, the capital that we just took, and we are planning on moving out against Agartha soon and, leaving it somewhat undefended. Now, in the short term, Ulm is probably going to be pretty busy against Vanheim, but, we do need to worry a little bit if Ulm manages to get back on their feet and, start looking for somebody else to attack. We do have some relatively juicy holdings now that are right on their border that, at least for the short term, aren't going to be super well defended. But in the good news department, we were also pretty close to Vanheim, who's been dealt a pretty major blow, and they're definitely the more dangerous of the powers, so this is probably a good result for us, and we'll probably also encourage Abyssia to attack Vanheim. For our part, we do clear out that last crippled barbarian, so that works out in our favor. Our commander manages to do the deed, so we retake that. We are happy about that, and then, of course, unexpected events. Apparently TNN had a horror cult that they either weren't dealing with or maybe they were planning on dealing with and then weren't able to get to it because we invaded. But regardless, we have inherited it, and at this point I don't think there's really anything that can be done. There's just going to be horrors popping up in this province periodically, and they will play a part in this campaign. It is probably worthwhile to just check the history of the provinces that you conquer. I mean, there's a lot going on in a Dominions game, and oftentimes you don't really have the time to do everything. But if you do find yourself with an abundance of time, just taking a quick gander at the province history of provinces that you're taking over to make sure that there's no horror cults or anything horrific that has taken root or started to take root before you took the province. It could be helpful. But it's not just the horror cult that is happening this turn. We also find 6 astral pearls, which is very nice because our astral income is not great. And then there's an ill omen, misfortune. That's fine. We already have a bunch of misfortune. Speaking of misfortune, one of our augurs blocked an event on our fort, so we do like that. And this is probably more, stars are right for alteration, which we're not going to take advantage of. And then we catch quite a few scouts, most of which are just on TNN, which is pretty normal because people try to watch large battles, and we were not especially rapid in taking that capital. So we find a scout from Russ on top of TNN, and then we find a scout of Kalem's on top of our own capital, so that's a little more interesting. Kalem, of course, was an ally, kind of, or at least working with TNN. Now, we do have Abyssia between them and us, so it's unlikely that any hostilities are going to happen, but they are at least still interested in us since they parked a scout on top of our capital. And then we find an Agarthan scout on top of TNN. That's pretty normal. Of course, Agartha is scouting us. And then we have a little bit of patrolling, and I will catch you guys after the jump. Alright, this is the situation and what we're doing about it. This must be the turn that we sent the NAP cancellation notice to Agartha, and as a result we are bringing up a decent number of more mages, although maybe not as many as you might expect. So we just threw some boots onto a nature mage, and I believe that's the only movement out of here. We are forging a couple of logistical items that will provide us with temporary fire gems and temporary astral pearls, which will reduce the burden on the gem resupply for this northern army. We're bringing in more vine ogres. We're just finishing out a little bit of slinger recruitment because we did lose some slingers, and we will want some siege strength. Agartha can provide quite a bit of, siege strength, but also siege defense, so we want to make sure that we get through that relatively quickly, although this late in the game, I don't know about recruiting more slingers. They are at least cheap and provide, average siege strength, so they're not the worst option for siege strength, and that's what we're going with. That's pretty much our only troop recruitment, other than, of course, our Equite, always recruiting. In the south, we are not actually moving out. This is just our raiding group moving back along with a priest. So at this point, I don't think I realized that there wasn't anything to be done about that horror cult. And if you don't let it get too far, one of the things you can do is if you raise your dominion high enough, then you can, rid yourself of the horror cult, but not if it's already progressed this far. But we're going to give it a shot. So we could be losing some priests to a horror cult, to the horrors that they summon, or, maybe not. It is pretty random when they arrive. That said, since we have to wait 3 turns, we don't really need to move our army out this turn, and we may be thinking that we don't want to jump on top of Agartha's capital right away with our army. Like I said, I am trying to get a little bit better at this point about, attacking with smaller raiding forces first, and then moving the army in when we can. And this is kind of looking like a situation where we might be able to get away with that in terms at least of what Agartha has defending their capital, because they don't really have much other than, some casters, many of whom are more the researcher types, so not especially powerful. That said, we might get beaten to the punch because there's a bunch of skin shifters and great bears here. So it does look like Russ is moving forward, although, this mountain pass is probably open right now because there's a lot of heat here. So they're going to be able to move in on top of this fort unless they decide, for whatever reason, these other provinces are more important to take. But usually people make a beeline for the forts. So it's kind of looking like we might get beaten to the punch here by Russ, or at minimum, it's going to come down to the wire. Otherwise, still trying to keep an eye on the world at large. This is where Ulm won that battle. So we can see they've also done a decent amount of raiding, and have retaken some of their territory. So they still have their work cut out for them. They're a lot smaller than Vanheim, but they're also not that far from Vanheim's capital. And like we've said, Vanheim is pretty long and stringy, and they haven't really finished off completely either. So this could turn into a really bad situation for Vanheim if a lot of their neighbors decide to attack them, which is often the case if people see that you've taken a major loss. Otherwise, we see that Femoria is relatively large. We see a good number of provinces down here, and we see they also extend all the way up onto this border. So we're sending our scout back into Russ's territory since it's looking like, Russ is somebody that we're probably going to have to be interested in. We're also, checking out the extent of Agartha's territory in this direction. It does look like Ubar is still alive and hasn't been taken out by Pelagia. Speaking of Pelagia, it looks like they also have at least a little bit of a land presence down here in the south, and Machaka continues to look, relatively large and strong. So we're continuing to try to get a sense, of their scale and their neighbors and any possible conflicts that they might be in addition to Xibalba, another relatively large power that we're also interested in, since both of those powers border Niflheim, and maybe Niflheim's next targets, assuming that Niflheim's next target isn't us. And then we are also doing a bit of astral booster forging, probably to bring another Mine Hunter online, because we do have some penetration gear here. And then we're also bringing in some undead leadership, which in retrospect maybe not the best plan, because we can use our mages here have pretty good magic leadership, although actually these Dustwalkers, they have morale unlike many undead, and our mages, even in white mage form, don't have great leadership, so they actually provide a penalty to morale. So I guess I felt it was worth the death gems to actually bring in an undead leader that could provide undead leadership that didn't give that morale penalty. We haven't really utilized these Dustwalkers, so we're probably going to use them in this upcoming attack against Agartha. So I think that more or less covers turn 56.